and 11:38 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here for the next several hours to bring you all of your top stories and live events from across the country and across the world. I do want to take you out to this post here coming in from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over in Israel. Now, as we are just hours away from the start of that ceasefire, you can see there on your screen that he did have a statement saying it might be in jeopardy. We know this has all been very, very fragile, but he says, quote, "We will be unable to move forward with the framework until we receive the list of the hostages who will be released as we agreed. Israel will not tolerate violations of the agreement. Hamas is solely responsible." Again, that ceasefire just hours away from being expected to actually begin. It's going to be an overnight situation. However, now that there are more questions than answers. I do want to bring in Mark Chandler, the Director of Government Relations and a Professor of Practice at Coastal Carolina University, also a former Senior Defense Intelligence official. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and kind of break down this and all of the other developments in the Middle East.
You're welcome, Josh. Good afternoon, and we're going to give it a shot to break it down anyway.
For sure. And first off, I do want to ask you about this statement from Netanyahu. What do you make of that overall?
Well, one, I think it's an important statement that he made because even though this starts in less than 12 hours, Hamas has already missed a critical deadline, and that is the release of the names of the hostages that are supposed to be released tomorrow. I mean, that already shows, some not breakdown in the agreement, but at least some lack of sincerity on Hamas's part as we go through. And I think it's good that Netanyahu pointed out that Hamas is already kind of not fulfilling their end of the bargain.
And I have to ask, because there are concerns about Hamas upholding the terms of the bargain, because if we think back, we remember that the first ceasefire that took place, it was Hamas that broke the terms, and that's why no more hostages were released. So is that maybe the biggest concern at this point?
Well, I think Hamas is already not setting out on a good foot as we start to move through, especially less than 12 hours before the agreement goes into effect. But I have to, let me just say I'm cautiously optimistic this time. But I'm also a realist. And when I talk about that, we're talking about negotiating with a terrorist organization whose desire is to wipe Israel and all Jews from the face of the earth. So looking at that, I have to kind of say, okay, let's hope, which is not a good plan, but let's hope that they're going to follow through with this. And I think what we're going to see, and I'll go over the details in a moment, but when you look at the first phase, which lasts 42 days, we're talking 16 days is critical, 42 days is a long time for a negotiation like this. And I think actually Hamas is going to use this ceasefire to resupply, refit, and move its fighters around so that if they do back out, they're ready to go after Israel with some force immediately upon backing out of the deal.
And going in reverse a little bit, you touched on this, but I do want to go over some of the terms, because a lot of folks have heard about all of this, but kind of in bits and pieces. So can you explain the overall terms of the agreement between Israel and Hamas?
Well, there's three phases that they've identified through the negotiations out of Qatar. The first phase, as we have talked about, begins 8:30 tomorrow. And in that, by 4 p.m. tomorrow, the first set of hostages are supposed to be released. And that's 3 Israeli women, are all the indications that we have. But in exchange for that, out of the entire first phase operation, 33 total hostages are supposed to be released. Unfortunately, not all of those are going to be alive. And so we don't know the breakdown, because right at this time, Hamas holds 94 hostages. It's estimated by Israel that 34 of those are dead. So we don't know the breakout of those hostages that will be released in that first 42 days. In addition to that, the order at least goes women, sick, and men over 50. So right down, and Hamas hasn't started. Also in these tomorrow, voice get to